Hello everyone, and welcome back to Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. In our last video, it was a sad day indeed when King George VI passed away in his sleep. He had been having health issues and appeared to be on the way back to good health after the removal of a lung. The nation and the royal family were very upset, so let's see what happens today. The Queen had a great sense of loss when the King died. They lived their lives as one. Their love was a deep one. The sudden separation was a physical as well as a spiritual shock, and the Queen had great grief. The Queen had given the King what he'd always longed for, a happy family life. The Queen dedicated herself to him. She helped him transform himself from an unconfident young man into an active and effective working member of the royal family. She gave him confidence and social grace. She helped him with his stammer and worked to control his temper. After the abdication of the King's brother, she helped King George VI to have the courage to carry the unwanted burden of kingship. In the war, she had been his equal partner in sustaining the people of Britain through 6 years of suffering. After the war, she supported and calmed him through the difficult, austere years of social change. She devoted herself to his care when he became ill. The King always talked of his family as we four, but within we four, we two were the closest of all. Those closest to Queen Elizabeth saw that the couple had a mutual dependence. Without her, the King could never have become the great and gallant king he proved to be. But what wasn't widely known was her great reliance on him, on his wisdom, his integrity, and his courage. She had been a vivacious aristocratic, but an unsophisticated girl. She became a much-loved queen. It was as the King and Queen that they had become the symbols of British defiance and victory during the war. Now she was alone. Through the early weeks of her bereavement, she was comforted by the letters of love and sympathy that came in from friends, relations, and strangers. Winston Churchill wrote eloquently as always, "All feel how your Majesty's devotion and love made it possible for him to reach the pinnacle on which he stood at his death. There must be some comfort in this, but then there is the future. Boundless hopes are centered in your daughter's gleaming personality and reign, and these will find enduring expression in your Majesty and will hold in all our thoughts as long as we live." His wife Clementine wrote saying that she expressed our love and gratitude to you, madam, for all that you have given us all the years of your marriage. You have shewn us what family life can be, not merely as a domestic state, but a warm, glowing existence full of interest and variety. She was right, because the King and Queen had their obvious celebration of family life and was one of the qualities that endeared the King and Queen to the people of Britain. America also sent tributes. General Eisenhower sent a 3-page letter expressing admiration for the King and devotion to Queen Elizabeth. Eleanor Roosevelt wrote, "There is nothing one can say to lighten the burden of your sorrow. Later you may be able to think with happiness of the life of service you and the King lived together, and then you may be glad to feel how many of us appreciated the King's many great qualities and were grateful for what you both meant to the world, as well as to your own people. May God give you faith and strength and consolation." When the Duke of Windsor found out, he immediately sailed from New York, where he was staying, to attend the funeral. The Duchess wisely remained behind and advised him, "Now that the door is open a crack, try to get your foot in the hope of making it even wider in the future, because that is the best hope for we, capital W, capital E, Wallace and Edward. Do not mention or ask for anything regarding recognition of me." She urged him to see Queen Elizabeth and try to explain what he had felt at the time of the abdication. After all, there were two sides to every story. So this time, Queen Mary, who was grieving, spoke on the Duke's behalf. She wrote to Queen Elizabeth to beg and beseech of you and the girls to see him and bury the hatchet after 15 whole years. I gather Dee is awfully upset, as in old days the two brothers were devoted to each other before that dreadful rift came. I feel grieved to have to add this extra burden on you three just at this moment, but what can I do? And I feel that you are so kind-hearted that you will help me over what is, to me, a most worrying moment in the midst of the misery and suffering we're going through just now. Queen Elizabeth was not enthusiastic, but together with her daughters and Prince Philip, she did see the Duke, who came to tea at Buckingham Palace on February the 13th, the day of his arrival. So that feud is over, I hope. A great relief to me, Queen Mary wrote to the Athlons. Before he left, the Duke wrote to Queen Elizabeth asking to see her alone this time. He wrote to her, I can well understand you're not wanting to be bothered by people at this terribly sad moment in your life, but I would very much like to have a talk with you alone before I return to America. I feel for you so deeply and would like to say so in person. She reluctantly agreed, and he called on her at Buckingham Palace on February 27th. The Duke himself made notes of his meetings with his estranged family. He said, Mama as hard as nails but failing, he wrote. When queens fail, they make less sense than others in the same state. The Cookie, the Windsor's unflattering nickname for Queen Elizabeth, listened without comment and closed on the note that it was nice to be able to talk about Bertie with somebody who had known him so well. Writing to his wife, he said, Cookie was as sugar as I've told you, and went on to write in bitter, insulting terms of his family's coldness to him, describing his mother and sister-in-law bitterly as ice-vein bitches. Putting his private thoughts aside, a few weeks later, in May, he sent Queen Elizabeth another affectionate letter, asking to see her on his next visit to London. She agreed and invited him to tea on May 27th. Queen Elizabeth had great grief, but she had courage. Less than 2 weeks after the death of the king, she announced that she wished to be known as Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, although privately she disliked the title. Horrible name, she said. With the help of Tommy LaSalle, she drafted an eloquent personal message to the nation. It said, I want to send this message of thanks to a great multitude of people, to you who, from all parts of the world, have been giving me your sympathy and affection throughout these dark days. I want you to know how your concern for me has upheld me in my sorrow, and how proud you have made me by our wonderful tributes to my dear. I want you to know how your concern for me has upheld me in my sorrow, and how proud you have made me by your wonderful tributes to my dear husband, a great and noble king. No man had a deeper sense of duty than he, and no man was more full of compassion for his fellow men. He loved you all, every one of you, most truly. That, you know, was what he always tried to tell you in his yearly message at Christmas. That was the pledge that he took at the sacred moment of his coronation 15 years ago. Now I'm left alone to do what I can to honor the pledge without him. Throughout our married life we have tried, the king and I, to fulfill all our hearts and all our strength the great task of service that was laid upon us. My only wish now is that I may be allowed to continue the work we sought to do together. I comment to you, our dear daughter. Give her your loyalty and devotion. Though blessed in her husband and children, she will need your protection and your love and the great and lonely station to which he has been called. God bless you all, and may he in his wisdom guide us safely to our true destiny of peace and goodwill. The national sorrow at the death of King George VI was immediately followed by a happiness at the prospect of the young queen coming to the throne. The torch had been passed to a new generation. Now the Queen Mother felt out of sorts. She suddenly found that she was no longer the mistress of any home. Buckingham Palace was a tied cottage as well as a tied office of the monarch, and the Queen and Prince Philip would need to move from Clarence House into the palace where the King and Queen had lived since 1937. The Queen Mother would have to find another house in London, and she would no longer consider Windsor Castle, Balmoral, or Sandringham home. The prospect of leaving the palace made her upset. On at least one occasion she collapsed in tears on discussing her inevitable move with the Queen, and immediately wrote to apologize. She suggested to the Queen that she and Prince Philip should move into the Belgian suite on the ground floor of the palace. These were the rooms which the King and Queen had occupied during the war, and that would give her a time to move out of her own rooms on the first floor without any ghastly hurry, and I could be quite self-contained upstairs, meals, etc., and you would hardly know I was there. It is angelic of both of you to tell me I can stay on a bit at Buckingham Palace, and I am most grateful for your thoughtfulness. I know that it took Granny some months to pack up everything, and I fear that I shall need some time too. But what is a few months in a lifetime anyway? Thank you, darling, for being such an angelic daughter. So in this episode, we see how the nation and the world admired the king and sent the royal family their condolences. The Duke of Windsor went to the funeral and tried to worm his way back into the family. You could tell he really despised his sister-in-law, the Queen, and it seemed even his own mother. The Queen was much younger than Queen Alexandra and Queen Mary when their husbands died, and she didn't know what to do with herself. She now had to find a new place to live, and luckily her daughter was patient and didn't mind her taking her time to get her things together. Her and the king were so close in their married life, helping each other through good times and bad, and they had a deep love for each other, and I can imagine she felt shattered. The torch had been passed to a new generation, and the Queen Mother had to watch from the sidelines. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, if you could give it a thumbs up, it would help the channel out and keep it growing. As I mentioned before, I created a list of merchandise from Amazon that I thought you might be interested in, and if you click on the link, it takes you to the Amazon page. And if you purchase anything, I get a small commission that is of no extra cost to you. But more importantly, I wish everyone a good day, and tune in again soon for another episode of Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. Thank you. Bye.